Hi Vicky, hi Naveen.
Hello.
Uh,
Hey there.
Hi. Hello.
Hey, Varun.
Hello.
Hi,
Hi
folks.
Azim.
Hey, Jim.
Okay. Give folks a few more minutes to join.
Jim, I think yours is making some noise here or something.
Oh, yeah, just 1 second.
Sure. Thanks.
Is that better now?
Yep, right, thanks.
All right. I guess we can get started. Um, are there any new folks that want to introduce themselves on the call, maybe before we get started? So you want to go ahead
Yeah.
first?
Hi. Yeah. So uh, I'm Saurabh. I'm in IBM Dublin office. Uh, I I'm working with the security compliance team as a dev engineer, and that's a new role for me. And before that, I was working as a infrastructure side, fabric side, and I have around 16, 17 years of experience. Before that, I was in India for Tel Labs, Advana, and Viasat for telecom side. I was working with them, and then this is my new. And I was very keen to start with this open source things and work with the security side. And I got this opportunity here in IBM to start with open source. So no experience in Go. I'm new in security side, so started learning on that. So I majorly work in Python and C. I have a prior experience, Ansible, Python, C, these kind of things I have experience. And I'm here now.
Cool.
Welcome.
Thanks, Saurabh.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just started with ticket number 1534, which is something copyright updates. I want to understand more on that.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have it as an agenda item, so we're going to chat about that later.
All right. Thank you. So
Mhm.
that's all about me.
Cool. Thanks, Saurabh. Anyone else wants to go? I know Varun has a demo coming up. So if anyone apart from Varun wants to go. Yeah, I think I don't see any new folks actually. Varun, do you want to get started? So Varun has a demo for us about step security.
Yeah, sure. Let me just share my screen. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see it.
Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to demo is this thing called as Hardened Runner. It's essentially a purpose-built security agent for build servers, and it works for the GitHub hosted runner as of now. So let me actually just start the demo, and I think things will become clearer. So what we'll do is we'll use this GitHub Actions workflow, as something that that we'll sort of try and secure. And as next steps, I've just pasted it here, and I click on secure workflow. And I mean, this is a different system, but what it essentially does is it adds this step to the workflow, which is which is the hardened runner. And let's go and run this. So what I'll do is I will run this. So this is a GitHub action which has been added here, and you will see that it sort of adds this input, which is egress policy audit.
Hey, Varun, would you mind just stepping back for a second and kind of like setting context for people about what Step Runner is before we get into exactly the implementation details?
Sure. Let me just commit this so it starts to run, so we'll save some time. So what this is, this is like I said, it's essentially a purpose-built agent for build servers. So when you add it, what it does is it's essentially for security monitoring of the build server, and in order to both prevent and detect security issues that are targeting the build server. For example, things like the code cov breach where credentials were exfiltrated, and so on. And actually, I'll cover that as part of the demo. So what it does is in here is that in this step it installs this agent. So typically actions they run some stuff. Instead, this actually downloads and installs an agent onto the Ubuntu VM, which is running this particular build, and then it starts to monitor outbound traffic and file changes and processes and so on. And once the workflow is complete, you can there's a link here, so you can click on that, and you get sort of these security insights. So it's, for example, telling that when the actions checkout step was run, this was the process that was called, and this was the outbound call that was made. And then when you ran, let's say, upload coverage to code cov, then it called this process, and then it called these outbound endpoints. So first of all, it gives you this sort of information about what happened on the build server when a particular workflow ran. And then you can also use this as a policy and restrict outbound traffic only to these domains or endpoints in future runs. So what I can quickly do is to copy this and run this here. And what I'll do is I'll try to now simulate some of the previous attacks that have happened, to see how this sort of prevents them. So earlier the egress policy was audit, now it's changed to block, and to these endpoints. So let me actually go and quickly simulate some of the some of the previous attacks. So what we'll do is we'll simulate DNS exfiltration, which was something that happened in the dependency confusion attack. So let's see. So here is just going to do an NS lookup. So I'll copy this, and just like in an actual scenario, this would have happened as part of one of the steps. For example, maybe during like npm install or something like that. But here I'm just simulating it as one of the steps. And another thing we can do is to simulate what happened during the code curve breach, wherein there was this extra call being made to an IP address to exfiltrate credentials. So we're not exfiltrating credentials, but we just make that extra call. And also to show file monitoring, I'll also do just some code which will modify a source file as part of one of the steps. And so that's so I just set all of these things up, and I'll just run this again.
Warren, so just quickly in interest of time. So while the build runs, maybe we can in parallel take questions if folks have, because I mean, if I understand correctly, I think at least I get the gist of what the tool is doing. So just wanted to see if folks have any questions.
So I'm fairly new to GitHub Actions because I spend a bunch of time in Kubernetes, and they've got their own doodad for that. But so we've got the scorecard action right now, and what I see as kind of a common pattern is essentially having multiple directories that execute different actions. So I see there's a note to discuss donating the project to OpenSSF. Like, is that something, like, curious about opinions, like, is that something that we could bring in as a secondary action or an action that runs in tandem within the Scorecard Actions repo?
Actually,
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, so the intent of this would be to run it actually as part of some of the existing workflow. So let's say there is a publishing workflow, which is publishing, an npm package or a Docker image. Then the idea is that one can just put this as a first step, and it can monitor the workflow. And in fact, in the future, it can also do stuff like provenance generation using introspection. So, whereas the scorecard action runs as a separate workflow and, analyzes the repository for various different issues, this one will not necessarily execute as a separate workflow, but will get added to existing workflows as the first step. So then it can monitor that, each of those workflows. Did that answer your question?
So sorry, I was referring more in like as we start the potential donation discussion, more like a code organization standpoint, right? So if I linked an example for CodeQL, the CodeQL action, a lot of those, like each of those directories, like so analyze, auto build, PR checks, all of those are separate actions, right? So like if it were to be donated, I don't know what the process is for that, but like if it were to be donated, like would that be a consideration? Like could that be something that we could put under the scorecard repo?
I want to take a stab in this. I don't know whether Varun has the thought process. Multiple things obviously can be done. Whether scorecards can check other actions part of our scan and say, hey, you should probably use the hardened runner and set permissions, set outbound traffic. That's something that Scorecard can recommend if it's contributed to OSSF. My two cents. I don't know, Varun has any of the thought process on that.
I think if the question is around the repository, then I think it would make sense to have it in a separate repository, something like OSSF/hardened runner, because it does something different from Score. So otherwise people might get confused between, what Scorecard does versus what a hardened runner does, but I don't.
Right. I was meaning that we could potentially recommend hardened runner part of Scorecard, not within Scorecard. I was trying to just to be clear.
Yeah, sorry. This is more a code organization thing than anything else, right? So like if we have because we've basically bootstrapped the release process for Scorecard Action already, right? So if it's in the same repo, that it can kind of leverage that.
So does the action also could be useful for like not just the build runner, like every time there's a secret used, I guess that would be a target to harden the job, right? Since you're currently looking at secret exfiltration. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah, that's right. And some of the repositories are also using it during like an end-to-end test workflow to see if any of the dependencies are, making outbound calls, which could be an indicator of them being compromised.
Yeah. One question sorry, do you want to go ahead?
Oh no, I just wanted to say that I guess there are ways to exfiltrate the token through the GitHub API. So basically, to make it even harder, you'd have to hook into the calls, before it's even doing the TLS, unless you want to man in the middle of the TLS connection. But like if I have the secret, I can basically send it to push it to one of my repos, or like use the GitHub API to say, hey, create a pull request to a repo that I control and exfiltrate the secret. So I guess that's also one avenue that I would use to exfiltrate the token. Yeah, so sorry, as in going.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for sort of improvement. For example, it could in the future do HTTP level controls, right? So you can say that only allow, let's say, get or post to api.github.com/org/repo. But essentially the whole idea is, once you have an agent running on the Ubuntu VM, then you can just do a lot of more stuff in the future. Right now, it only does based on domains and endpoints, not at an HTTP level. But I think that's something that can be done in the future.
Keith, do you have a question?
Yeah, so this is interesting stuff, and I think it's really valuable to be able to obviously watch, and especially have policies around outbound endpoints during the build process. So I think the hardened server or the hardened runners is generally a great idea. I'm wondering, how does it connect with scorecards? I mean, why are we bringing it to this particular working group? If the goal is to get it into the OpenSSF, which it sounds like this is probably a good fit for an OpenSSF project, looking at just a quick overview of what it does. It almost seems like it might be a better fit for tooling, or well, I don't know whether, I don't want the project to get held up in entering OpenSSF through some procedural sort of thing, right? And if there's a better place to present it such that it can get streamlined through the process more effectively, maybe that's a good way to go.
So yeah, so I would say that, probably I'm sure we have it documented somewhere what the actual process is, but I believe it is it would be going through the TAC for approval, so the Technical Advisory
Yeah.
Council.
Yeah,
And
I've been on several TAC calls and it certainly will end up there.
Yeah.
Wasn't sure what the process was before it gets to the TAC, whether it goes through a working group, and if so, which working group makes the most sense to make this move most smoothly.
I think there are two ways a project get approved. If it's a top level, it's good to go to the TAC itself. But in many of the cases, the project can be just approved by the working group itself. So that's where I think the parent working group for this one is, I think, best practices, right? We can go there. But it's good to understand like what's the purpose, or like do we see this fitting as a right project for OpenSSF? And there are some key things which I definitely like about the project. It's the remediation aspects. Like it doesn't need to be part of Scorecard, but it can actually plug in pretty well, which is more around automatic remediation of CI/CD workflows in some way. And Scorecards could get a recommendation around it, which I think it does, but this is more like an automatic remediation project that I see evolving.
yeah, I was actually going to say that we do already recommend it in our remediation. So it's like that's how I found out about it. I popped it on a few Kubernetes repos a few days ago. So
Very nice.
So does GitHub today allow you to set up firewall rules on the runners that they have on the GitHub hosted runners?
probably not public GitHub.
Okay, because in the best practice group there are several folks from GitHub, so I guess they would ask the question like, hey, why do we need this? So I think if GitHub doesn't have even this ability, that's pretty valuable for someone who wants to add networking firewall to their runners.
So in interest of time, I think maybe we can move on to the other topics. I think the Stephen's Stephen's feedback on like whether to integrate this with scorecards or not is definitely pretty interesting. Maybe we should take this offline, like have a GitHub issue where we can discuss this, because there is some slight overlap. So that is actually one of the reasons scorecards even recommend step security. There is some overlap about in what's happening here. So maybe this is a topic we should discuss offline and figure out how to do it. And I can try and bring this topic up in best practices group to see how that goes.
Yeah, and I think it's sorry. Yeah, I think it's for me, like just like managing multiple repos, like there's a thing that you have to do every time, and like, is it configured properly? Like, did I do that? Like, I know I just hardened this repo, but did I do this? Or like, we bumped this version of Go and now we have to do blah. Like, did I do it for all of my repos? So the reason I was suggesting code organization doesn't necessarily need to be under Scorecard, but knowing that the actions that OpenSSF produces flow through a similar build and publish process, right? So like if we have something that's tight already, right?
Yeah, plus one. I think another consideration which is on similar side is like, as OpenSSF, we should also be mindful about how many different actions we ask folks to keep installing. So if it's possible for us, if we see a path to kind of merging it and going forward as a single tool, that definitely would be ideal. So yeah, I think we should definitely take this offline and have a broader discussion there. Cool. Before we move on, does anyone have any other questions?
Cool to know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
So maybe we want to tag. Sorry, go for it. Sorry.
Just to does it take LFS, Git LFS also in consideration? If we put large data in that also covers while checking this runner? Git LFS.
Uh,
Yeah,
I mean, it's not.
uh, just came in my mind. So I am very new, so maybe my questions are not that relevant.
So
I mean,
I guess
some
the, sorry, go for it.
No, go ahead. I don't really have an answer.
Yeah, I think it would be like trying to understand what the use case would be there. So like, how many repos are you managing that have LFS enabled? Are you like, what's the like kind of like what's the tie-in between the large files and the runner? I think, you know, in some scenarios where we're maybe not necessarily checking for, you know, say like an all-star check for like binary artifacts, right? Maybe someone's committed something that's huge, that's sensitive, and they shouldn't have, right? Like that's a potential, but like I think from the context of ensuring that the actions themselves are hardened, then like I don't really think LFS comes into play.
Thank you.
Cool. Should we move on to updates maybe? I think, Naveen, I guess you had a bunch of updates that you wanted to talk
Sure.
about.
Wait. Hold on. Sorry. Yeah. So updates. By in just 2 weeks. One of the things that we're doing is Scorecard Actions is primarily on shell script, and we're having a bunch of issues, especially writing tests to that. I pretty much put most of that to go, and thanks to Rohan. Rohan is cleaning it up, hopefully, for some of the things that I'm missing in that. Second thing is our builds are sequential. One of the things I did is parallelize the builds. Now you have about 32, 35 items going concurrently. I know but we are almost a mono repo, so that's a reason on that. So another one thing is Scorecard v4.1.0 was released. Bunch of updates. That's one thing. And there was a couple of dangling items thanks to Stephen. We also addressed dependable vulnerability issues that was complaining, though it's not actually an issue, but because we want to take care of that. Last one is we have code coverage, code cover installed across the whole organization. Now the good thing is anytime there's a PR that comes in, the code cow will comment on things that does not have unit test or coverage. So that's a good thing. And we also have code cow on Scorecards action. That's my update. Thank you.
Awesome. So I was going to ask about the do we have the release process documented?
For Scorecards? Oh no, for Scorecards?
For anything?
No, we
don't.
We haven't. We should do that.
Okay. Okay. Cool. I'll add that to the contributor.
Yes.
Maintainer docs or
Perfect.
punch list.
Yes.
So let me share my screen, and because we can do updates via the project board as well. So I'll walk you through some of the stuff that I did recently. All right. Let me know if you can't see my screen.
Good.
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right, cool. So here is the project board. So one of the things that I do whenever I get access to an organization or I have access to a repo is I try to create a project board. GitHub makes this pretty easy. There are just some things to keep in mind. I know some folks were mentioning that GitHub is not necessarily their day-to-day, so they're not familiar with some of this. So I'll do the Eli 5, right? So once you have access to an organization, depending on how the organization is configured, you may, so an org admin can kind of flip the switch on whether or not users can create project boards, as well as repos and various other things. So GitHub is kind of like two project flows, one that's in beta right now, and another one that has been out for a bit. So you can see that there are a few project boards are ready. Few are private, but the scorecard one is not. So I will talk about this real quick. So when you create a new project board, you have and I'll create a test and then delete that just for the sake of like cool new project, right? And description, the visibility of it. So there's a cool piece around project template, and you can choose if you want you can choose what you want the kind of automation flow to be. So the scorecards one right now is configured as automated Kanban with reviews. So it'll set up 5 columns, or 5 or so columns, right? 4 or 5. And they are to do in progress, review, approved, review approved, and done, right? So there are 2 kinds of project boards within GitHub. One is an org level project board. The other one is a repo level project board, right? So the repo level project board is kind of nice because I think it will automatically pull things into the project board. However, what you get out of an org level project board is that I can go to the configuration and settings, and so when I can set visibility across the org, I can set default org member permissions, but I can also set linked repositories, right? So right now I've got the Scorecard Actions, Scorecard web app, and All-Star in here, right? I added All-Star just to bubble up some things that may be cross project. You can also configure collaborators, teams. So if you have access to do this, you can also create teams. So I created some initial teams for Scorecard, a parent team that we can assign. So when you look at teams, you can see that if you go to repositories, you can see that that team has access to triage things on the Scorecard repository. So I don't have access to the other Scorecard repos, or else I would add them here too. But that allows us to default permissions for someone who gets added to the Scorecard team. So like you do some work, you do some triage work, you do some review, you do some approvals. Eventually you get that triage hat, and we'll work out what the contributor ladder looks like. And then from there, you know, we'd add you to one of these teams. And then the teams are turtles. I've nested a Scorecard admins team and a Scorecard maintainers team, and you'll see that if we look at the repository again, this team has admin privileges, and then this maintainers team has maintain privileges, right? So that's teams. What's cool about teams is that you can also assign them to project boards. So you'll see that the Scorecard parent team has read access, and we should probably just bump that to right. Scorecard admins, Scorecard maintainers, admin and write respectively, right? So back to the board. Any questions on that before I continue?
Looks good to me.
Cool. All right, so by default, when these project boards get created, you get that to do in progress, review approved, and then done, right? And you can see that each of these has like a little automated as blah, right? So you can hit the manage automation and then configure how things move through the board, right? Or how they move into that column or out of that column, what the exit criteria is, what the entry criteria is at least. So what I usually do with these boards is I also add a backlog and I reconfigure so that to do by default is automated as to do. I configure the backlog one to be to do instead, because to do you want to be kind of like these are things that we're focused on, and backlog is like we got to look at it, we got to triage these, right? So to start, I grabbed everything that was in these repos and just tossed them in the backlog, right? And I left a few undone so that we could do this on the call too, right? So we'll see things are in scores. This is Scorecard Actions. I can just drag and drop things in. We'll do some of those. So I'm not going to assume that any of these are necessarily in progress. I see these are all stars. I'm going to skip them. And then, yeah, I think these are the rest are probably all star, right? Now, what's cool about the board is you can kind of like plan your day or plan your work. So if I'm, when I get to GitHub, whenever I get to GitHub, one of the first things I do is I go to my created, and I might sort by, recently updated, see if there's any progress on some of these things that I'm doing. And then I'll try to hit them from top to bottom. Then I'll hit my, usually like I get very little focus time. So I'll try to push, like if there are updates to my personal PRs, I'll try to push those along before I go into assigned, review, requested, and then I'll jump over to mentioned, right? So, so that's my workflow, at least for GitHub. I don't really use the inbox because it doesn't have some of the filtering that I want. But from the project board, you do have this filter cards option, right? So something else that I did was I renamed the milestones from milestone V whatever to just V whatever, right? So I can choose to, so the things that are in to do right now are milestone : V4, right? And you can see that it will filter everything out of the board outside of just V4. And then I can also do V5. You'll see that all of the V5 stuff is in the to-do column. Some of it may be in progress. Again, I didn't make assumptions about what the progress was until we chatted about it, right? Something great that you can do is, so anyone has access to this board, you can go to this board and say, hey, I want to know what is, I think it's space, right? I want to know what's help wanted. Boom, right? And you get an idea of what where it's at. If you're maybe a newer contributor, you want to look at good first issue, and I can drop this label here, right? You're like, cool, good first issue. Maybe I know I'm going to be able to write the code quickly, and it's something that's in the current milestone. So I'm like, cool, maybe I'll grab this, right? Maybe I want to go a little slower, ask some questions. Maybe I'll grab something that's in here, right? Let's say this handle copyright in handle copyright dates and headers. That's in progress because we started to chat about that. So Rob's going to work on that, right? So milestones are things that you can do. You can also do, you can search by assignees. So, and that's just going to be your GitHub username, if I can spell my name correctly, right? And I can see I've got some things in progress. I can also do, there are a few keywords for no. I think you can do no milestone, right? So these are things that are not milestoned. You can see that there are a few things in progress, review in progress. So as they move through your PR workflow, for the PR specifically, right? As they move through workflows, if the PR is approved and it's on the board, it'll slide over, right? It'll slide over to reviewer approved, right? So reviewer approved might not even be super useful to us because we're doing the we might click auto merge on the PR, so they're going to pretty quickly move out of this column and into done, right? If their tests are passing. You can also do, so ideally we have things that are milestones assigned, right? So one of the first things I would do if we're kind of doing like sprint planning, as it were, is check out, one, drain the existing milestone, or drain the previous milestone. So we've got a V4 milestone as well as a V5 milestone. We should ideally drain the V4 one and close that out before we head to V5. But you'll see that a lot of these have no assignee, right? So if people are working on them, we should get them assigned. Now, tricky thing about assigning people in GitHub is that sometimes you need to be an org member to have that assignment, right? So that's something to consider too. And I think that's maybe a larger discussion in terms of how we handle org membership for OpenSSF. So any questions on that stuff?
So we don't have access to it yet, right? It's only for you right now?
No, we can, so, sorry.
I think we have access to it.
It's,
Yeah. I can
Yeah, it's
access.
publicly available.
It's publicly available. Sorry, go for it.
I had a minor problem where when I went to look at it because GitHub automatically, for some reason, dumped me into a beta view of projects, and it showed there were no project boards. There was a drop down in the upper left.
Yeah, and then you can just hit that.
Right. Yeah, and then I set that and it showed up. So if you're not seeing it, try the other option.
Okay, I found it. I found it. So,
yeah, it's kind of confusing. No, it's totally not you. It's them.
So the only thing I think it would be good to get a clear list of maintainers and the level of access that they should have. I have a PR open somewhere. Chatting about this, settings.yaml, right? So the settings.yaml separate discussion, but you can see, and Vicky, this may look familiar since I did it on the to-do group stuff too. But you can see that like we have the collaborators listed, and this is just a list of the current collaborators. Not to say that like all of the people listed need the permissions that they have. So we should discuss that. But there's also a team section, right? So you can assign permissions by team. So preferably you're doing permission assignment via team. And for you to be a part of a team, you need to be an org member. So for a few of you who are maintainers but not org members, you don't have access to like write on the board. So we should fix org membership as well. And then this listing right here, if we're running Scorecard against ourselves, we're not doing a good job because we've got, or rather if we had All-Star enabled, right? It would flag you for having outside collaborators here, right?
This is pretty cool. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, you're getting quite good at this. Lots of practice.
Too much practice.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stephen, for setting this up. This was, I mean, I think Scorecard has been needing this for a while now. So
yeah, absolutely.
Happy to help.
So we have about 20 minutes. Lauren, Rohan, do you have any quick updates you want to share?
Rohan,
I have a few questions on some of the things that recently happened, especially on the testing. Just want to ask that. Okay, at the end.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's maybe make sure that we get into discussions for like definitely for Saurabh, so he has something to walk away with around the copyright stuff, and then go into maintainer discussions.
Agree.
Sure, yeah, we can do that. Stephen, do you want to lead that? I think you have context there about the copyright header discussion.
Sure. Yeah. So I pretty much always preface these discussions with I am not a lawyer, but based on some of the feedback that we got here, I think the question comes up pretty often, like what do I do? I'm going to share my screen again. So here is a discussion that popped up on one of the issues, and the question was around like, hey, well, what should we do with copyright headers, right? So currently we have copyright year security scorecard authors for generated files for generated files in general, but specifically in Go, we don't care to list the year. So the question overall is, do we care to list the year at all? Do we need to? Is there, right?
You do not need to.
So boom, there's the answer. So, and then I think a larger organizational question is, we have multiple projects here, right? So like, for an example, I was working on a PR and I was refactoring some packages in Scorecard for the sake of testing them out in All-Star. So I actually started the refactor. I basically copied a bunch of stuff and started the refactor in All-Star. and then just kept on churning like that. What I realized as a result of that is a few of the files that I had created had all-star authors on it instead, right? So given, using as usual, using Kubernetes as an example, Kubernetes authors is kind of like across the board for the project, right? There's no differentiation between sub-projects or SIGs. It's not Kubernetes SIG release authors or anything like that. It's just Kubernetes authors, right? So the question is, are we fine with continuing to? So if we don't need the copyright date, cool. That's easy. If we, what do we want to list as the authors? Should it continue to be security scorecard authors, or should it become OpenSSF authors?
I would pitch that at the LF lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we anyone here has the context to actually answer that. Maybe just to continue the status quo, we just use security scorecards for now, but we can ask someone from the OpenSSF or the LF team to answer this.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Saurabh,
Yeah.
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah. So the date, the year we need to maintain. You want to say that?
No, we don't.
We don't need to maintain the year.
Okay.
So concretely, just listing this here, concretely, what you'll want to do is, I believe we also have a check in the repo that's using add license. So add license, as far as I know, and I've only used it a few times at this point, you can specify, I think if you do like -C for add license, you can specify exactly who the copyright holder is, right? So you do like an add license -C scorecard authors, right? And I think it has support for not including the date. So as far as I know, the existing behavior is that if a copyright header already exists on a file, it will not try to modify it. I'm not sure if there is an edit option for that, but that's something worth checking out. If the edit option does not exist, so you're going to do a few things, right? You're going to ensure that there are headers on all of the files, which, I mean, our CI CD should already be doing that. And then you'll want to check the workflows for the add license check itself. Because basically what the add license check is doing is it's pulling the content, it's pulling the add license tool, it's running it against the repo, and then it's doing a git diff dash exit code, right? So if the exit code is 0, that basically means there was no diff, so it's a test pass, right? So you'll want to edit that command to ensure that we're using the right the copyright holder.
Okay.
Just to add
So-
to that, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Naveen. Go ahead.
I was the one who did that. Like, you should be able to look at, like, I can point you a couple of pieces of code where it is, so that right, there's a workflow file that does that. So
Yeah, I'll
so that's right. So you should be, so if you go modify those things and then grab and replace without the date, it should probably, I think the main has that, if I'm not wrong.
main, yeah, and I think it's at the bottom.
Yeah, it's at the bottom, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, so
Yes.
add license
So that's
ignore.
Yep. That's where it is. Sorry,
So,
if you want to look at that.
yeah, so I would drop the we should include the shell scripts, test data. Yeah, we're probably fine to not include it on test data. Apache, that's fine. Is there a flag for?
So I haven't looked at add license before. Does it use appropriate SPDX formatting and the like? Or is it just sort of slamming some strings in there?
You can, if you specify, I think, do I have it on this computer? Yeah. If you specify -S, it'll give you the SPDX identifier.
Okay, yeah, we should probably be using that.
Yeah, for sure. So
Probably that
yeah,
should be a separate ticket item, so that we don't want Saurabh to add
like
too many stuff.
overload. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, well, here's the thing: because you're going to be doing the greps anyway, this is the adding the SPDX for new files is just adding the -s flag somewhere, right? And if you're going to be doing the greps anyway, you might as well add the SPDX identifiers, right?
Sure.
So just to start, I would like just do a touch of a new file, right?
Mhm.
Touch a new Go file and then run the tool against the repo, and then you'll with the SPDX identifier, and then you'll get exactly what the copy needs to be, and they can use that to search and replace.
Okay. I may need more information while doing it. I'll ask you.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, please
and
share
I'll
the-
drop.
Yeah.
I'll drop exactly where this is in the chat. Here you go.
Also, sir, we are available on Slack, or you can also ping the GitHub issue that's discussing this, and we can try and guide you through that process.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Cool.
So I
So
did the
yeah,
setup
then
local. Yeah, I did the
sorry.
local. Yeah, I have done the local setup on my laptop and repo, and I was able to build my code, install everything. So everything
Okay.
is good now. I need to try this part now.
Cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I saw you spun up like the containers and stuff. You don't actually need to do that.
Okay.
We have a make file in there somewhere, right?
Yep, we have
Yeah,
a
okay.
make file.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
if
so
you,
there's
if you read through the make file has all the targets. So like Azim and I have spent too much time on the make file trying to address everything. So you can read through the make file. Also has decent amount of comments. So if you do make help, it should give you all the stuff that it requires.
Okay. Thank you. Just I was going
Yeah.
through the document, and I thought let's go with how the setup is to understand how it is.
Sure.
And yeah. Thank you so much.
now. Random aside, since we were talking about make files, has anyone ever played around with Mage?
I have, but it's that's a conversation separate. It's a love-hate relationship.
For context for folks, I'll do another screen share and show it off real quick. I think it's release utils.
Oh, all right. You guys use it?
Yeah, so it's not everywhere, but for the newer repos, what I'll do is we'll have this one has like a baseline Mage file, and it's just doing the execute of the main. But the Mage file itself is basically it's meant to replace make a make file, right? So you can. What's great about it is you can write the same way you normally would if you're normally writing in Go with IM. So like, and then you can build out libraries. You can build out a separate package for it, which is pretty cool. Check for dependencies and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's pretty cool. We should probably consider it actually at some point, because our make file seems to be just keep growing and growing.
Yeah, our make files are really huge now.
that's
Problem to maintain.
same problem with the release engineering stuff. So I was like, if we have a library, if we have a package we can just pick up, then I can just import that in every repo.
Yep, cool.
Cool. We have about 7 minutes. I quickly wanted to see if folks want to discuss the V5 milestone. I just want to get some consensus on if folks think.
Can I?
Yeah.
There is somebody else, like there are other people in the call. Do we want to ask if there's a specific reason? Like I see Brian. Brian, is there something specifically you want to come in? You come in the call. I want to make sure that we give them opportunity.
So appreciate checking in. I saw on the agenda we were going to just give a couple of updates on the the scorecards.dev site, but I also
Oh.
joined a couple of minutes late, so I didn't want to rehash something if it had already come up.
Yeah, right.
No, sorry, I can quickly give the context there. So I was hoping David Wheeler could join us today. So we kind of waiting on David to kind of unblock us on getting us the domain. So yeah, so that was the only thing to discuss about the site.
On that note, David is like, I don't know if you're, David is off. I was able to get help from someone else from LF who was really nice, quickly solved my problem. So if we are blocked, we should probably reach out just so that.
Yeah, we are not blocked on it as such. That's why I didn't want to like
Okay.
also ping David. I know he's kind of on vacation and not really responding to email. So yeah, I can get him, talk to him some other time. Cool. Should we discuss V5 milestones?
V5?
Sure.
So I think the first thing I'll mention about V5 is that so one, we should walk into ideally we're walking into V5 with with a release process documented, and all of the maintainers with the appropriate access to the repos and stuff like that. This is V5 if you want to walk through specific things. Figure out, use the project board.
Yeah, I definitely like the idea of having a well-defined release process for V5. I just wanted to open up the board and ask folks if this seems too much work for V5 or if people want to add more things on it, like you mentioned, the release process. And if it looks good, we should probably create a milestone, agree on it, and then kind of start working on it.
So we've got the milestone open. What I would say is that I think being able to set a date for it. If we know when V5 is going to be, then we'll get a better idea of capacity.
Fair enough. Let's say we can aim for early Q3, which is maybe around July.
July, okay.
Because we definitely have a bunch of stuff on the V5 milestone as of now, so just want to give enough space.
Also, as part of the process, I would like to do some configuration around like release notes, because we can, I think in terms of, I think it's possible for me to just template, again, floating over to Kubernetes repo. But we have so for Kubernetes, we have a release notes tool. So when I'm creating a release, I basically I do the auto generation of the GitHub notes first, because it gives you some like nice doodads, like the contributors list and the changelog. But for the release notes tool in Kubernetes, you can specify like from SHA to SHA. And if you're tagging, so we're using like kind labels in Kubernetes at least, right? So it's looking for these kind labels, but I think you can specify like what labels a thing has, and maybe what we can do is like do auto assignment of the labels based on the conventional commit emojis, or use the emojis to filter things into these buckets, right? So I'm able to look at like, so to kind of do the side by side, right? Of the one example of Kubernetes release notes. And this is actually what we use for the changelog itself on Kubernetes, right? So if we look at, we look at the scorecard for 4.1, and this is, it's good because we're doing squashes. So it's kind of like a singular idea. But the reason we prefer these for Kubernetes at least is there's no guarantee. So basically what's happening in this template is the same questions we'd ask in the same questions we asked kind of for the issue template for OpenSSF. The only change is that well, one, there's the slash commands for the kinds and areas, but also there's a code fence block that says release note, right? So if I say release note none, if I label something as release note none, I can just write none into this block, and the bots will figure out that it's no release note. But if there is content in the code fence, when I run the tool against the PR, it will pull that content out. So this gives maintainers an opportunity to write something that is like reasonable, like something that people need to know. Like if this is a user-facing change, please describe what it is, right? So
yeah,
just
sorry. No, I just want to say, yeah, I mean, Scorecard has been like looking for something like this for a long time. I mean, we've been kind of struggling with, how to do this neat release notes and also like automate it in a nice way. So if you don't mind, if you could like document this for us and like something we can follow as a process, that'll be very, very helpful. I mean, I'm completely on board to following such a process if it makes our releases easier. But I think we all need a way, like a document to go to and say, hey, this is what we need to start doing from now on.
Yeah, because I'm sure that like one, not everyone has access to do a release, and two, so like that's so like one of the things on my list is ensuring that I have access to the to each of the scorecard repos, and I know there's also discussion about maybe or maybe not what happens with the cron stuff. Like, do we want it to continue being in the repo? It sounds like it's more advantageous for it to stay in the repo than for it to move.
Yeah, I mean, technically it should be out of the scorecard repo, but yeah, it's a lot of work to actually move it out, and that's the only reason we are keeping it there.
Okay.
It just makes the whole maintenance easier. But yeah, let us know if we can like help you, or like if you need any kind of permissions or anything of the sort to do this here. Like it'll be very useful to kind of have this process set up for at least a few scorecard repos that we have, like Scorecard Actions or even Scorecard, just to start with.
Yeah, so I think going back to the board real quick. So if we can do this, so if the teams, if you can add the parent team as triage for all of the scorecard repos, and then also add the admins team as admins, and then the maintainers team as maintain, and that'll give me access.
Okay, I can do that right now. Let me just do it right now once this meeting is done.
And I know we are over 2 minutes over, but do we want to discuss anything more on the V5?
I think I'm good. It sounds like the consensus seems to be most people probably don't have any comments on the stuff already there. We can add an extra issue there talking about how we also want to have a well-defined release process, and maybe that should be good to go for V5.
All right, cool. We should also make a decision about Semver. Only because I've seen some things pop up recently. It'd be nice. So again, with Kubernetes, like you can flag, if you have an owner's file, you can label things automatically. So like there's certain instances where we may label, certain directories as like API changes, right? So at the point where something triggers an API change, we should say like, hey, this is, because we let out the logging in 4.1, but that's really a breaking change for people. So that should have been a 5, release.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we should probably put out some docs, like Lauren said, saying maybe we don't have, or at least we don't support breaking changes or backward compatible changes in using Scorecard as a library, or we should actually bite the bullet and actually just do it.
We should do it. Yeah, because I think, whenever you see a Semver compliant tag, the immediate assumption, and maybe it's the wrong assumption, but the immediate assumption is that the repo is actually adhering to Semver, right? So we should strive for that if we're going to use Semver tags.
Makes sense. All right. Yeah, I think that's probably something we can't aim for V5, I would say, realistically, but I would definitely, I think we should definitely have this discussion for sure.
Sure.
Cool. I guess we have 4 minutes over time. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Take it easy.
Yeah, I'll talk to you, Stephen, Azim, and Naveen also sometime. If I need any help, definitely I would.
Yeah, we'll be on Slack.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
it easy.
Thank you.
You can create an issue. You can also create an issue if you want, so other people who want to start may have similar questions. So we're pretty responsive on the issue and the repo, so you can try that too.
All right. Thank you.
Cool.
Bye bye. Take care.